Alright guys, TacticalRab back again today. Hope you're all doing well and enjoying your day so far. Some juicy drama between SlasheR and Octane again following the Major 3 event in Texas. Given a hot takes post by the Minnesota Rokkr, Octane says red dots actually aren't required in this game, and if anything, increase the skill gap between the pro teams. SlasheR certainly disagrees. Very much intrigued to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you are new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. Doug reckons he's still going to make it. Crimsix also apologizes for the whole drama right at the before the grand finals, when OpTic came out on stage. They had Scump do the walkout for the OpTic guys. They thought, oh yeah, get Crim on stage for, I mean, it was pretty entertaining, right? But it's classic Crimsix shenanigans, where he kind of messed it up a little bit, and he says, okay, look, I kind of butchered it, but whatever. We filmed a really cool skit before the whole walkout, which should get posted later on. Hopefully it does. But overall, awesome event. Was bouncing back and forth from stream to stream, spot to spot, because I think he was also playing in one of his like sim racing tourneys that weekend as well. So pretty cool stuff. But yeah, so Crim apologizes. Hopefully he can do it again, but I'm not sure the CDL's going to be too keen after that performance necessarily. These are the numbers actually just for the entire tournament and some of the key matches of the tournament. Major 2 peaked at about 302,000. I'm guessing that was for the Championship Sunday series between OpTic and LA Thieves. This tourney though went one step further. 335,000 was the peak. Of course, this is across the mainstream and the watch parties, and compared to Major 1, about 160k. Now in fairness, that was largely because OpTic went out early. We know that OpTic carries the viewership. There was a consistent trend. In fairness, FaZe versus Surge also peaked about 220k, but it's still, of course, final day, the OpTic matches, which were a lot of the matches they played that day. So, you know, of course, final day is going to have more viewership anyway, you would argue, and then with OpTic being there and in the grand finals, that was pretty much going to top the lot. And even FaZe OpTic had more than Toronto OpTic, which is maybe not a massive surprise, just given the caliber of those two teams, and it was getting a little bit late in Europe for some of them after, well, once the final match had started. But the numbers are honestly phenomenal, and just wanted to show this as well. This is the Call of Duty League main channel viewership during the majors. So keep in mind here, right, the Twitch viewership we have since the start of the season is obviously only for the main channel. So it peaked at 162 at Major 2, 140 odd at Major 3, and also Stage 1 as well. Because of course, Stage 1 there was no Scump watch party, right? And that is the key point. The fact that Scump, since he's come around, has effectively, the level of the main broadcast is maintained, but we also have Scump bringing in another up to like 100k viewers. I think he had, what, 170k or something at peak? Like, that was outrageous. So it's kind of funny to think about, right, that going from Major 1 to Major 2 with Scump retiring, the viewership has like almost doubled because we have the Scump watch party, which is outrageous to think about. But also, right, the main broadcast has higher viewership on average than it has done before, even with Scump now co-streaming. And if you look at the average, that's the key point to me. The averages over the last couple of seasons have been, what, 60, 50k, 40k, 50k, something like that. The average is now on the mainstream 90k, 80k, 85k. So they've gone up substantially, just the average numbers, in addition to having everything else. So, you know, it's obviously a no-brainer that Twitch has been massive for the scene, and it's just a good thing in general to have. I don't know that many have been saying, look, Activision, please, whatever deal you may or may not be working on with YouTube, just postpone it for now, at least give us the season, because it's obviously a great time to be a Call of Duty fan at the present time. And it's interesting in a way because we feel like we have it bad to a certain extent, which to some degree we probably do. But if you're a Halo fan, or if you're like a Gears of War fan or something like that, like it ain't looking good. And obviously when Halo first released and was doing so well from a competitive perspective, they were doing a lot of things right, but just some serious mistakes, not making any changes, and like everything's just gone downhill on Halo. I think the key issue with Halo to me is that I have no idea what the format is. The format doesn't make any sense. There's barely any matches or any events. You don't understand what's happening and when, especially as like a casual fan of Halo competitive, I guess. And even Snakebite says, CDL increasing in viewership. Now, okay, the viewership numbers have gone up. Has the scene at Call of Duty grown massively lately? Probably not. I think obviously part of it is the Scump watch party, but look, the viewership is going in the right direction, that's for sure. And I think ranked play has definitely helped on that one, to be honest, right? People being able to play ranked and knowing that's what the pros play and having the top 250 in the game, knowing the pros are on there, like, you know, it's pretty good, I think, for the scene in general, and it definitely has brought in new fans. Also, I do want to give credit in a way, like, this is something that's obvious and should be done probably in all esports, but having just these weekly scheduled games does maintain the interest and creates the storylines, which is true. It's not ideal, these online matches, but at least it does have some benefit, especially compared to what they have in Halo. So I thought it was an interesting thread, because we feel like we've got it bad at times, but the Halo scene most definitely has it worse. Now, there are some things I think we would like to fix, and easyMac comes through a nice thread here of what he would change about the major. One of the ideas here on the Friday matches would be to, instead of having the final elimination game go between the first and second matches, you swap them around such that it's it's the second and third matches that play the final elimination game. Therefore, those teams don't have to sit around for hours. So a lot of this is from a player perspective. And also Sunday, swapping the winners match with the losers match, which to be honest makes a lot of sense, right? The idea that the winners play first and then like they have to wait, what, 4 or 5 hours to play their next series is probably not ideal. They should really swap those around, I think. But at the same time, it does mean that if you're the losers team and you win this series, then you have to play 3 games in a row, which can mean you're coming really hot off this series. Like, it feels like this third series of the day usually always goes the way of the losers team because they're coming off hot and the team that lost in winners has been sitting around for some time. But when you get to the grand finals, the team that's making the losers run is actually quite, you know, they're almost burnt out. They put a lot of COD within a few hours. So maybe it almost helps both teams if you swap these rounds such that the first team that wins and loses gets another little bit of break before they go on the big run from losers finals onwards. Just an idea, and I know that we discussed the pros and cons. The other possibility here is the fact that the best of 7 ends in a rather anticlimactic way. Now, to me, I think best of 9 is maybe beneficial just because we can have more hard points. I think I would like to see a return to best of 9, to be honest, even though it's slightly quicker, these grand finals for European fans nowadays. But the fact that the grand finals finishes search, control, search is a bit anticlimactic, to be honest. It's not particularly good. There's an argument to say put 3 hard points in and only 1 control. I wouldn't mind that either, to be honest. And obviously, the lack of an advantage for the winners bracket team. This is what they used to do back in the Modern Warfare days when it was a best of 9 grand final, effectively a best of 8, but with a 1-0 advantage. That's what they did back then, but apparently this is way too complicated for fans of Call of Duty to actually figure out. And Clay agrees with this one, says real talk and all this type of stuff in the replies as well. Quick other comment from Clayster on the Fortress control stuff, because as Clay says, now what do I do after the tourney's over, because there's quite some time off between now and the next event beginning. And no surprise that Clay's not having a good time watching that particular map. Now let's dive into some of the drama then, right? So the players first of all have to go back to playing online nowadays, and online COD is not in the best spot. We saw Clay made the point the other day that because the online matches are worth so much relative to LAN matches, 10 points per online victory is massive in the context of qualifying for the World Championship. Everyone pretty much turns on the loudness equalization. This is not allowed on LAN. The other factor that I think is interesting is that at Major 4, it was meant to be at New York, right? Then it was cancelled for various reasons. Now it's going to be with no fans in Columbus, Ohio. Pretty much, I think, what the Pro-Am was last season. So there's going to be no crowd and therefore less background noise to such a degree that still, even if loudness equalization is turned off on that event, it's going to play a little bit differently. And I think like pros know that online the gameplay is so different to LAN, and therefore you can argue a lot of the online matches don't really have that much bearing on what happens at LAN, just because the game, you can't flank in the same way. There's a lot of plays that you just can't make online because you know that at least a couple of the guys on the other team are using loudness equalization, especially if you're in the bottom half of the league, because if you don't, you're kind of trolling in a way because you can get away with it and everyone does it because, you know, that 10 points is massive if you want to qualify for champs and it's your livelihood at the end of the day. But there has also been some talk about hot takes in the CDL, and I think it's very interesting how the kind of conversation around red dots has changed over the course of the last several months. SlasheR is still going balls to the wall, we need red dots back, as are I think most players, just because from a casual playing perspective in either ranked or in pubs or anything, it makes it a lot easier and I think a lot better in general for a player to actually play the game. Red dots have been around in Call of Duty for a long time, and I think for good reason, because it allows you to actually play in public matches on your own without an entire team communicating in a reasonable enough way. However, in esports for some time, let's say in Halo for example, there's no minimap, right? They don't get to see where the players are. They simply have to have great communication, and some teams with great comms will generate a skill gap here, right? Because as Octane says, we know that Thieves arguably, I would say, have the best comms in the league, up there certainly with the Toronto Ultra. There's a few teams in the conversation, but as Octane says, no red dots on the minimap has a minimal effect, obviously still some impact at the highest level of competitive COD. So his argument is that because the comms are so good at some of these teams, it doesn't really matter. But I would say that honestly, to me it goes one step further, that I would still like to have red dots back, just because for playing it from a casual perspective, I think it makes more sense. There's a reason why they've been around. But for the competitive players with 4 guys with, you know, some of the best communication in the world, it generally is going to be either negligible or actually generates a skill gap. Because I think you guys might have remembered that 1v3 that Clayster got earlier this season. I think it was against the subliners, and he was laying down on Fortress, got 1 kill, and then the next 2 guys jumped out to challenge him, and he was in the wrong corner that they thought he was in, so they just ran out and he shot them both in the back and got the 3-1 versus 3 clutch. So that was an example of a red dot would have had Clayster killed there, but because they communicated did poorly, he could take advantage of it. I've seen actually a few times with FaZe even, that there'll be a player that will be in a spot where he would be an easy kill if they had red dots, but because they don't, they have to call him out, they get the comms wrong, and he gets the kill. And I've seen a couple of times now that FaZe's comms aren't perfect in those type of situations, and players getting caught off guard by no red dots. Now, maybe Thieves or Ultra or a team with better comms might not get into that situation, so it does generate, you could argue, a bit of a skill gap here. And even Octane says, look, that wasn't going to make the difference at their results against Vegas at the major, but it's still an interesting point. Now, Beans, I thought, went actually one step further here and made it quite an interesting analysis, that if we had no red dots ever, then put red dots in, people would say it is less skillful. And I think this is certainly on the money here, right, from Beans, because we know how it is in Call of Duty. Put something in, take it away, people complain. Put something in that was never there before, people complain. And I imagine this would be the case. If red dots were never a thing in COD, and now they're in the game, then people would say, oh, Infinity Ward trying to lower the skill cap. Now, it's kind of funny in a way that Infinity Ward have tried to help the newer players by getting rid of the red dots, and therefore they can't be found while they're camping in a building. However, I'm sure a lot of newer players actually want the red dots because, you know, some people actually want to move around, can you believe it, in COD. But in a weird way, unintentionally for them, they may have added a skill gap to the competitive scene in terms of how well it's played. And as I say, I think I would prefer them to be in, as certainly would SlasheR. And he goes on to say, you guys are straight up tweaking, right? We know that SlasheR's been a big proponent. Every single major SlasheR will tweet something out like, don't let this moment overlook the fact that we still haven't got red dots and they need to make the return. But yeah, still definite disagreement here between Octane and SlasheR. And even I thought this is pretty funny from Octane, because we know that after SlasheR destroyed them, in fairness, at the major in the first round of winners, when they got 3-0'd in about 35 minutes, the door dash challenge was in full effect. SlasheR said, look, I taught those guys how to play COD. I came up with those guys. I was on that organization. I built that team. And obviously SlasheR was talking pretty big. And as Octane says, guess you didn't quite teach me enough, right? So I thought that was pretty funny from Octane. And we know these two, of course, they were teammates. They've got a bit of a back and forth now, especially because some would say, well, look, if Octane was available, FaZe would drop SlasheR for Octane. I don't know if that's necessarily true. I don't know if I would do that personally, but there's still a good little rivalry between these two guys, and not just in the game, but also on topics like this. Couple of things to finish out the video here. We thought this is quite interesting as well. So Doug Levy has kind of done the analysis on what number of points is going to be required to make it through to the World Championship. Based on Major 4, Major 5 going forwards, he reckons that about 195 points is going to be enough to make champs. He reckons about 50% of the time that's going to happen. So for teams like Rokkr and Surge, they're going to need to get, let's say Rokkr, for example, 110. They're going to need to get something like 40 to 50 points over the next couple of stages each to make it to champs, which I think makes a fair bit of sense. Win 2 of your online games, get top 6, and you know, as long as you do that a couple of times, you should be in a decent enough position. However, Vegas, right, being on 90 points, he reckons they need about 100 more, if not more, to be, you know, pretty confident they can make it, which means they're going to have to go 3-2 online. They're going to have to get top 6 again. It's going to be tough for Vegas, as we discussed earlier in the day. Just by way of example here, the teams that have won the majors have got 85, 95, 95 points respectively for winning their stages. I think, I guess both those teams went 3-2 back here, but also with New York, right, I think there was only 4 matches to qualify in the first part, so they got less points as a result. But most of these teams at the top should be absolutely fine, but it's the cutoff that gets pretty interesting. And just in the CDL Hero, a nice Brighton stat, the best placement at first land in the CDL era only, Hicksy has won it, right, and this is remarkable. The first time in 12 years that's happened, but other players have got close. Shotzzy, iLLeY, of course, Ghosty here, second place. Insight, Nasty were third in both of theirs. I guess alongside Gizmo, right, in that London team at the start of last season that somehow got third at their first event. Scrappy, Beans, and then of course Nero, Cap, and then Stanley, Hydra, and Mack at 6th. So yeah, pretty incredible list of players that Hicksy has managed to jump straight to the top of. But very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.